Hello people, in this lecture we're going to create the core, the domain layer of our application. Let's create a new project. In this project we're going to create a blank solution. Let's select here, you can search here for blank solution. Create, I will place it in my downloads. Let's say net restaurant. Here in the solution, click here and add a new project. We're gonna add the layers of our application is gonna be a class library. Only the web will be a web project. Let's create a class library. Let's say net restaurant dot core. This is the core, the domain layer of our application. Delete this class that it creates when you create a class library. Creates a new folder called entities. Let's create the entities of our application. Let's create a new class. Let's create a user. Let's say the user will have an ID. A user will have a name. A user will have an email. A user will have a password. A user will have a Boolean property if they is admin. The user is an admin. A user will have an address to deliver our dishes. Let's make it public. If we just make it internal, we can only access it inside our class library. That's not what we want. Let's create now a new entity for dish. Let's say it's a public class. A dish will have an ID, of course. We'll have a name. Ctrl D, you can copy the line below. We'll have a description. It also will have a category ID. Later on, we're gonna place the navigation property here. And this is enough for a dish. Let's create a category entity. Category will have an ID. Category will have a name. A category will have a list of the dishes, and in the dish now we can set a navigation property for category. And now the most important entity of our application. Let's say class and order. Let's say order, and order will have an ID. It will have, of course, an user ID associated to it, a user ID. Let's say the navigation property for user. Let's create a datetime to say the time it was created at, and let's say the list of dishes. Let's create a constructor. So every time we instantiate our order, we will set the date for created ads as datetime now. Every time we instantiate it, it will start with this created ads as datetime now. Let's as well create let's say order status. Order status. Let's create a new folder for enums. Let's say enums, and let's create a order status. This will be an enum. Let's say it will be a enum instead of a class. Let's say a pending status, a processing status, shipped status, delivered status, and a cancelled status. Let's use the enums of our application. Let's import the namespace, and this is enough to create the core of our application for now. If you see those warnings are a new feature in C#. It's not a new feature, but it is kind of new, so I'm going to say that it's new. It's nullable. So if I don't say explicitly this property can be null with this interrogation symbol, it will give me this warning. So I can make all my properties nullable, or I can just change it in my class library saying nullable is disabled. But I will not do that. I will just let it as it was created. But now I'm going to commit the changes. So every lecture will have its own branch. So when I finish it, I will create a new branch and commit it. Let's create a repository using Visual Studio 2022. Let's create a Git repository. You must have a GitHub account. Now I'm already signed in. I will create, as it is default, I will let it public so everyone in the course can see this repository and copy if you are stuck or you just wanted to copy like these properties you don't want to type. Let's create and push. Let's save, create and push. Now if you enter my repository, on GitHub in my repository, I will add the repository in the resources of this lecture. If you search for net restaurant in my account, you'll see that I have my project here. Now it's in branch master, but I will create a new branch. New branch, let's say one main layer. Let's create, and I will push my new branch. If you see now, I have my domain layer branch here. In the next lecture, I'm going to create a new class, a new lecture, and I will say second and the name of the class. So if you are stuck, you can search for a branch. I will have a lecture for explaining this to you, but I explained it briefly so you don't confuse yourself or get stuck. If you get stuck, just come here and get the code or copy or run on your machine to see where the errors are. So see you again in the next lecture where we're going to implement the infrastructure layer. Take care.